Mr. Chair, my amendment will, once and for all, repeal a tax that both Democrats and Republicans agree isn't working, and I hope all members of this committee can support it. The Cadillac tax is a perfect example of how we could be working together to make targeted improvements to our healthcare laws rather than the damaging changes we're considering today, and this amendment would repeal the Cadillac tax. The original design of the Cadillac tax was intended to be a narrowly targeted tax on the most, quote, extravagant plans in order to rein in out-of-control healthcare costs. Instead, this tax will hit working families because of a variety of factors that are beyond their control, like age, geography, or occupation. As written, the Cadillac tax would kick in for families at double the rate of individual plans. And what we've learned, though, is that families' costs are often much more than double those of individuals. So it's left to working families and children to carry an outsized share of the tax burden, and we all know that this is wrong. Whatever the goal of the policy, the right path to reining in healthcare costs is increasing access to preventative care, decreasing reliance on emergency room visits, ensuring access to affordable medications, getting drug costs under control, and encouraging innovation and rewarding value-based outcomes by healthcare providers. Now, I wasn't around when the Affordable Care Act passed, but since I've been elected to Congress, I've been honest that there are parts of the law that can be improved, and this is one of them. What's really sad is that it's a provision that both parties agree isn't working, needs to be fixed, and we're still having this discussion. I know what my constituents want is affordable quality care, and by that metric, repealing the Cadillac tax would be a win. This can genuinely help the middle class and middle class families by ensuring they don't see higher costs or lose the coverage that they've chosen. And we've already submitted letters to the record with support from the Teamsters and the AFL-CIO with their support for this amendment. But today we're debating a bill that does nothing to improve access to care or curb costs in the healthcare system. We're not fixing what needs to be fixed. So what's this whole exercise really been about? Healthcare is too important to too many people to simply pass an inferior law so you can tell people you checked a box or kept a promise. The only thing this bill promises is worse outcomes for our constituents, for firefighters, for seniors, for working families, for so many others. So I urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to support this amendment and work in a transparent, bipartisan way going forward to do what's right, and in this case, what we all agree on, not just what's politically expedient. I know my colleagues spoke, when we spoke earlier about the Cadillac tax, spoke that they agreed that it should be removed. So we have the opportunity right now to do that. We should all support this amendment, and I look forward to that support. I yield back.
Does the gentleman from Ohio insist on his point of order? Does the gentleman withdraw? This gentleman withdraws his reservation. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Mr. Paulson, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we had a conversation earlier about the Cadillac tax, but I'll just point out this, is that keeping the Cadillac tax in place outside the budget window keeps a check on escalating health care costs while the House works to repeal it with something that is more fair, which we have in our legislation. And Mr. Chairman, as you know, extending the delay of the Cadillac tax further will jeopardize the bill in the Senate under the long-term budgetary rules. In essence, it's birdable. And so we can do better than this. I mean, this tax was put into place originally with Obamacare. It's kind of ironic now that the other side is working to get rid of it. But I hope that we can work together in the future to make sure that we replace this tax with a more transparent limitation on an overly generous job-based coverage, Mr. Chairman. I would yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Kelly, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. And I do agree with Ms. DelBene. It would be also my choice, but unfortunately, because of the rules of the Senate, what we can do is we've delayed this now until 2025. There's nobody that's in more agreement than I am with you about that. I would encourage you, though, to get on H.R. 173, which is a piece of legislation right now. Myself, Joe Courtney. It's also got a companion piece in the Senate, so it will be. It's one of those things we got to get over to the Senate, though, and to be birdable, we have to do it this way. Although I would say, listen, I don't think there's anything better than being part of your association with your employees. I mean, we've always provided health care. I think it's just a good thing. I think it takes a lot of burden off of taxpayers, so I'm very much in favor of that. But again, going back to what I said, in order for us to get that done, it's going to have to come out of the Senate because of the rules. So I do agree with what you're doing, but unfortunately I can't agree with this amendment because it will not get done what you want to get done. We are going to be delaying it to 2025, which for many people is the same as a repeal. But yeah, I think you're on the right track, and I'm glad you're here. I think we all need to be looking that way. I will say this, though. I think tonight, I think it's nice that we have these debates and we get together, but I think sometimes we get pretty snarky with each other. And everybody's guilty of doing that because it's the nature of things. Because we want to make more of an appeal to people who are watching. And I got to tell you right now, nobody's watching. But we still have a chance to work together on these things. So I appreciate you putting them in. I'm going to be voting against it because of the reasons I've already listed. But thank you for being on board. And think about H.R. 173. I think it's going to fit perfectly with what you want to do. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Chairman,
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Mr. Crowley?
it's interesting, the shoe's on the other foot. How's it fit? The
Well, the gentleman
conversation from earlier today,
it fits fine.
the conversation from earlier today was just the opposite, you know. And when I know it's late, but when I look at all the other attempts here to benefit the wealthy, there is no hesitation. It's only when it comes to working men and women we have that hesitation. Here's your chance. Either you're for the Cadillac tax or against the Cadillac tax. You can't have it both ways. And this is interesting here at 2:30 in the morning, 2:35 in the morning. But I heard earlier today about how you all were against the Cadillac tax and we were for it, and now we're against the Cadillac tax and you're all for it, it appears to be right now. You can't have it both ways. Either you're for it or you're against it. Yield back.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Questions on agreeing to the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Washington? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Pen chair, the noes have it. A roll call is requested.
Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kelly.
Do we have an opportunity to strike the last word?
We do. Not at this point, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Johnson, Mr. Nunez,